I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here we talk about true crime and psychology. Thank you so much for joining. Let's hop right into today's topic. Let's go. Welcome. I am so glad to get to chat with you all today about Lindsay Clancy's trial, day one. And the state came out with their thoughts on the case, what they believe they can have the evidence show. And I did just peek over at a few other people that covered this. And I've seen some consensus that some people think the state went too far by not even acknowledging that, yes, she can have postpartum and still be criminally responsible. They seem to think that all of that was just manipulation and that she did not have postpartum psychosis. That is what the state is alleging. The defense has a completely different perspective. The jury is in the middle. And the state's first witness was the former husband, Patrick Clancy. Now, I know he has done his best because losing a child, I would not wish that on my worst enemy. The fact that he might be remarried, and if he has more children, that will never take away what he experienced here. That trauma is real. And I think the judge cut off court where he did on day one, because I think the judge could sense the state was leading up to the day of the incident and the 911 call. The 911 call is not going to be streamed to media. And so I don't know how they're going to manage. So I don't know if the cameras will just start after the 911 call is placed. I don't know how that's going to go, but we will see what happens with this. This is a very difficult trial, and I have a video down in the description where I talked about managing your mental health if you do choose to watch everything with this trial, managing your mental health as you do. I did watch Lindsay during openings, and she did appear to dab her eyes. We don't have like a front camera, so we don't have like a great view. So I couldn't tell if there were tears but my understanding from listening to people that have been in the courtroom, that she's not really looking at the witnesses. She's not really looking at her lawyer, that she's kind of just staring off. Even when Patrick Clancy was on the stand, she really didn't look at him. It's my understanding during sidebars, he would sometimes glance over at her, but she's just kind of, yeah. And it's my understanding that the jury is paying attention. Based on reporting from somebody that was in the courtroom, they did not see the jury taking notes during this first part, because really this is Patrick Clancy, he's saying what he saw of her behavior and everything, how they met, how she was, before and after each child, and then the day of the incident. All right. And so there's a question, why did the state prosecute Lindsay Clancy? There is much more evidence that she loved and adored her 3 children. So I think there's going to be some evidence that she searched for, because I heard the state, and we haven't seen this evidence, but the state asked Patrick Clancy if he was aware that she was searching topics around, I don't know if I forgot. Let me pull up my notes, because I forget if it was around her death or the death of children. I thought it was like ways to harm yourself or something. I thought she searched something like that. Let me pull up my notes. Thank you all for being here. I'm Dr. Barry. I'm a licensed psychologist. I am not your psychologist. This is not a psychological evaluation. I do not know exactly what's going on with her. I am interested in hearing the doctors that did meet with her, because she does have, there will be some testimony coming out about her. All right. So I'm going to take a step back to opening statements. Somebody's mentioned when the state said she was choosing the quick and easy way out. Yeah. Yeah, rather than doing the hard work. And that could land negatively with some people because I'm not sure. So, and right now, I haven't formed an opinion one way or another about my thoughts on this case. I am hearing what the state's saying, I'm hearing what the defense is saying, and I want to hear from the mental health experts that met with her, that treated her, and also, I want to see the digital evidence. So, if there are searches on the phone, I am a little concerned about intentionally sending Patrick to the restaurant that was further away. That normally they would get takeout from someplace closer. That, but a person can be disconnected from reality and still do things that make sense, but it just looks different sometimes. So somebody that's found not guilty by reason of insanity, and our bar for that is so high because they have to be unable to recognize the criminality, like the fact that their behavior is wrong. And if you do things to hide it, if you do things, because even sometimes asking for a lawyer when you're arrested, when you do those things, the state is going to believe that you understood that what you did was wrong. Versus if you go back to some other cases that we've covered, if the person is arrested and they're over here proclaiming that they did this on behalf of God, or I don't know, like, so sometimes there are differences in how things present when it is a little bit clearer. Was this purely mental health, or could it be more than that? So, I already talked about the fact that Lindsay was emotional when the state opened talking about her children. And the state talked about the date of this incident, that on January 24th, 2023, the defendant took her daughter to a doctor's appointment, that the dad was at home caring for the two other children. When Patrick left the house, everything seemed normal. He know uh and the defendant asked him to go to a restaurant and to CVS to pick up some medication for one of their children. And then the whole like basement stuff, I'm going to skip over some of the specifics. If you would like the specifics, please check out the full coverage of this trial. Just trying to protect my mental health and the mental health of listeners. So after she did everything, she missed a call from Patrick and she called him and talked to him for 14 seconds, says nothing that gives him any concern. And the state says that she claims that this was auditory hallucinations. And the state then goes into what they believe she did that day. And the state says she acted intentionally, swiftly, spent time with family and friends, and appeared to be doing better. And Patrick Clancy's testimony kind of got into that a little bit because even the day of the incident, he mentioned that he thought that was one of her better days. And as a mental health professional, if I'm working with somebody that is having thoughts of harming themselves and we're monitoring that, I have to be very careful. If all of a sudden they seem really happy, they seem really excited, sometimes what that can point to is that they have a plan and they're happy because of the plan and not because they're no longer depressed. And so that's something that I monitor for when I'm working with somebody that is having thoughts, that has had thoughts. Patrick Clancy also mentioned that she denied having thoughts of harming herself or anyone else because a lot of people kind of put some blame on him, but he believed her. And we'll get more into that in just a little bit. The state described her as a classic overachiever that liked to control everything. And they called her meticulous, controlling, and manipulative, that sleep was adjusted to the minute, and that when she was responsible for it all, that it was hard for her to maintain control. She withheld information, reported inconsistent symptoms, and so the state is going to say that she did this because of all of the stress of things not going her way. And I don't know if if the jury is going to identify with that, because there are a ton of videos that seem to show her as a phenomenal, amazing mom. And two things can be true at the same time. And so that could backfire on the state a little bit. We will see what happens. I thought it was suspicious that she felt better all of a sudden that day, just because I know that sometimes, especially if a person is having significant thoughts toward themselves, sometimes there's this they get happy and like they're joyful and they have a really good day, but it's because there's a plan. And so and that would not be being detached from reality. I don't know if the state is gonna have an expert that might talk about that. Because I think the state is trying to say that she wasn't having any thoughts of harming herself, no thoughts of harming the children, because it's like, why would she do what she did to herself too? She is now like paralyzed for the rest. Because to me, what she attempted for herself was a serious attempt. Very, very serious. And that's why the defense opened with like pictures of her injuries. And they're looking at the state like, how could you say that this wasn't a serious attempt? Like, she's paralyzed. She has lifelong injuries and she has to live with the fact that she did this to her children for the rest of her life. And so I could resonate with that. I thought some of the defense's opening was a little disjointed. We'll get to that in a moment. Uh, and so they talked about her going to different doctors after about 4 months in treatment. The state says she didn't want to try anymore and no one could take care of them the way she wanted them to because they no longer had a nanny. And and the state says just because someone has a mental illness does not mean that they are not responsible. And I think the state threw that statement in there just in case somebody on the jury did feel that yes, she did have a mental illness. I think she would definitely meet criteria for postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. I don't so possibly postpartum psychosis. It would just depend on what was going on at the time. And then also depending, because the state is putting her out to be this like very controlling obsessive person, and I don't know if that's true, so I'm looking to hear and see more information around that. The defense mentioned that the jury is going to have to look and hear at some of the most horrific things. The state knows that information will kill the soul of this young woman. The defense said that. The defense described her as very physically fit, that she loved her children. There were some financial difficulties, and that with SSRIs, so with selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, that you would not give that to somebody with bipolar disorder. And so the defense believes that yes, she does have bipolar disorder, and that the initial medication triggered a manic episode. Those aren't the words they're using, but what they're describing is that the initial medication caused this negative effect. The state went through graphics of what she did to herself. They talked about a Jefferson fracture that resulted in her being paralyzed, and that she struggled with sleep for at least a month, probably more than that. And that on Zoloft, she felt no emotion, had no feelings, and that she was in the hospital for about 4 to 5 days, and that she loved her children and intended to harm herself. That's what the defense said. Okay. So let me see if there are any questions. Ah, what can you explain what psychosis is? So psychosis is hearing things that nobody else can see or hear. It can also be delusions. So psychosis is a break from reality. So that's auditory, so hearing, visual, hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that other people can't see or hear. In this case, She might say that there was a man's voice that told her to do this to the children. That's what I think might come in some of this based on reporting, based on things that I've heard. But that would be a command auditory hallucination. If somebody's hearing voices telling them to do something to themselves or somebody else, we normally hospitalize them immediately because people have done things like, so hearing voice, some people will hear voices and it just sounds like a radio. Like they might just hear somebody calling their name. They might just hear something random. And just because somebody hears something doesn't necessarily mean that that it's auditory hallucinations. Sometimes with PTSD, there can be this oversensitivity to sensory things. And when a person is in fight, flight, or freeze, or when they're in a trauma response, that sometimes they can like misperceive sounds or things. And so, but yeah. All right. So anyone can experience hallucinations without being, so psychosis is hallucination. So they're the same. So it's just a different word for the same thing. So there's psychosis is like the umbrella and auditory hallucinations come under it. So there's psychosis and then there's auditory visual hallucinations, delusions, paranoia. So all these other things fall under that. I hope that's helpful. Can someone being sleep deprived, can that cause them to hallucinate? Yes. So just being sleep deprived in and of itself can cause someone to hallucinate. And individuals with bipolar disorder can have periods of time of psychosis. So that can't for some people, because when we're talking about severity, sometimes somebody has a depressive episode that's so severe that they experience psychosis. But yeah. Somebody mentioned the struggle with sleep was the biggest flag to me, postpartum depression, etc. Yes. And the state tried to harp with Patrick Clancy that he didn't see the sleep disturbance. So I don't think the state believes it. Like the state is very skeptical. They don't believe any of it. I wonder what happened with her phone, because normally people that are struggling with insomnia, they're normally on their phone all night. Oh, if the defense is watching, but they probably already done all their stuff, they probably, but normally if somebody is struggling with insomnia, most of the clients I work with, when they're struggling with insomnia, they're on their phone. And that's where I sometimes try, 'cause sometimes being on your phone can make it harder to fall asleep. And so sometimes we try to find other things. But the state was really trying to attack the narrative that she she was having sleep difficulties. But yes. Can postpartum turn into bipolar disorder? So normally not. So bipolar disorder would be something that was kind of already there, but the prescription SSRIs can trigger manic episodes, and somebody that we might not know has bipolar disorder. There's bipolar 1. That's where a person has manic episodes, and so mania is um, so so there are clinical definitions. Just because somebody has high energy, a high mood, doesn't necessarily mean that they're in a manic episode. Manic episodes look a very particular way, and but it's having reduced need for sleep. Normally, a person cycles, so a person normally isn't manic all the time. So I've worked with clients that maybe could go 3-4 days without sleep in the midst of an episode, but then they would have a depressive episode and maybe sleep for 2 days or something. But yes, bipolar 2 is hypomania. So the manic episode doesn't go quite as high. There are signs of, but so it's hypomania. It's not as high. Bipolar 1 is that manic episode. It's tends to be a little bit more, we often think of it as more severe. Bipolar 2 is like your less, like it's still bipolar disorder. And then cyclothymic is where a person cycles in and out of moods. Yes. Somebody mentioned I was watching an episode of Chicago Med where a deaf man was experiencing auditory hallucinations. Is that even possible? So I haven't researched that, but it would be the brain doing something. So I don't know how the person. So somebody that had been deaf all their life, I don't know how they would talk about or explain that. But if the person all of a sudden thought they were hearing, but like it was only something that was in their head, I'm not sure. I personally have never worked with anyone like that. Yes, somebody mentioned if I have insomnia, I'm either on my phone or Kindle. Yes. So everybody I've ever worked with insomnia, they are normally on their phone. TV, something. Yes, yes, yes. What should happen if providers suspect the patient isn't being truthful during their appointment? So, clinical work is often it's not forensic. So, forensic work is digging to see is the person telling the truth. Now, that's where sometimes they might recommend an inpatient stay because if we're trying all of these things and nothing is getting better, but the person also isn't being consistent with the medication, and as soon as they have a side effect, they're stopping, and maybe we're waiting 2 or 3 weeks to get back in to talk about medications and everything. Sometimes they'll recommend a partial hospitalization. So, partial is where a person is receiving treatment, normally psychiatry and some forms of therapy from like 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's during the day, but they go home at night to sleep. They have to be stable enough to do this. And then there's acute short term hospitalization where a person goes for anywhere from 1 or 2 days. Normally, that would normally, but more common is 4 or 5, maybe 2, 3 weeks, and that's for stabilization of medication, all those things. I thought it was interesting that the state mentioned that the insurance never stopped approving care. That when Lindsay Clancy checked herself out of the psychiatric hospital, that she um, because if you sign yourself in, you can sign yourself out. And it's not always against medical advice because it would only be against medical advice if the person was still actively, thinking about harming themselves or others, or like if they were still actively a risk to themselves or somebody else. That's when they would say against medical advice. But if someone's been there for 4 to 5 days, they don't really think it's being all that helpful. They will often discharge, but they won't always say against medical advice. Because if I'm working with children and I discharge a child against medical advice, that can sometimes need to be a call to social services. Like if I'm saying this treatment is medically necessary, this parent should not take this child home, then that's where sometimes, because it can be considered medical neglect if it's a child. I hope that's helpful. Intrusive thoughts. So it could have been intrusive thoughts. So with obsessive compulsive disorder, and that's so some of those diagnoses have been thrown around related to this case. We do not know what's going to come up. But an intrusive thought is just it's not a hallucination, but it is a thought that the person doesn't want. So I've worked with clients that had intrusive thoughts. It's their own voice. It doesn't sound like somebody else. It doesn't sound like a man's voice or anything, but they're just these thoughts that they don't want, and it's difficult for them to get them to go away. Because often the more you try to not think about a thought, the bigger the thought gets. And so if I'm working with somebody that's having intrusive thoughts about like harming themselves, will often try to see, well, do you want to? Like where are we with that? Because sometimes we can, especially if it's like a OCD type thing, um, sometimes we are able to work toward the thought not being because they're not acting on the thought. So thoughts are not actions. But a person having intrusive thoughts can be very concerning. There are sometimes medications they prescribe, but there's also therapies that can be helpful as well. This is general information. This is not meant to diagnose or do any of those things. All right. All right. Let's see. How does the alleged cannabis use affect the SSRI she was on? I believe Patrick mentioned she had some when she was on the stand. So I think the state mentioned that she tested positive when they went to the hospital for cannabis. And let me look up. Sometimes it can have a negative effect. So normally, um, everybody's body is different. And SSRI. Yes. So SSRIs can alter how your body processes medication, but the more common side effect is like dizziness, drowsiness, and in rare cases, serotonin syndrome. So this is just general information. Sometimes there can be some mood impacts where some for some people it can increase their anxiety uh and so different people can have different interactions, but yes. Is there any specific behavior that would indicate bipolar diagnosis rather than by postpartum? Because many of those of the symptoms overlap. Ay. So the thing that I thought was interesting is that the postpartum symptoms got really severe as she was about to return to work. And for a lot of people, when we're diagnosing postpartum, it's normally the symptoms are normally there like after birth or maybe, but if these symptoms are developing as she's about to return to work, I would wonder if it might, I don't know. I would just wonder about that. Let me pull up because I have some specific notes about that. About is it postpartum or is it anxiety about returning to work? The two can overlap. So the two can definitely overlap. But the thing that can kind of help distinguish is how long has the person been feeling that way? Are the worries related to work and how it affects the children and different people? Can they still enjoy time with their children, with their family? Are they able to function at work and at home? But if they haven't returned to work, that's not a thing. But if they're experiencing panic attacks, intrusive thoughts, or persistent sadness, it's normal to have some anxiety about returning to work, but if it's severe, because postpartum anxiety or depression tends to be more persistent and harder to control. Um, I'm just interested to hear like if the state has a mental health expert that says they don't believe that she was experiencing postpartum. I don't, and they might not have an expert at all. I don't know what they're going to do. Um, the state prosecutor, she was on it, and I'm gonna get to Patrick's testimony in just a minute. People's psychotic episodes can vary by the person. Do you think the state proved that Lindsay was looking for Zoloft on her own? So I think that might come in through a different witness. I don't know if that'll come in through Patrick because Patrick didn't know. So he wasn't going with her to appointments. He wasn't aware because he just handed over all the prescriptions that he had. I'll get to it a little bit later, but the state brought up the fact that the medications, some of them were completely full and not used at all. Some of the prescriptions were only missing 6 or 7 of the 30 tablets. And I thought that was gonna be different. I thought she was taking the medication consistently. So when the state said that, I was like, "Ooh, I don't know." Now somebody taking the medication for just a week, that could be enough, and that's where a forensic psychiatrist will have to explain that. Psychiatrists are experts in the medications. I am a clinical psychologist and expert in the psychology of things. All right. I do not envy this jury. This is a whole bunch on this jury. This is a whole lot. Um, yep, yep, yep. All right. All right. So let me go back to the notes. So I mentioned with the defense, make sure to stay hydrated. Thank you, thank you. Um, the defense, I mentioned all the things they went through. So Patrick Clancy, I thought Lindsay looked a little emotional seeing him, and they went through their history. They met in Boston through his cousin, who was her college roommate. They started dating in 2013, moved in together in 2015, and were married in 2016. Cora was their first child, born in 2017. And I think that's my son was born. So Cora would have been turning 9 this year. He didn't remember her talking about any medication in nursing school. I have questions about that. Because when the state asked that, if they knew about any medications in nursing school, I have questions. Because if she had successfully been on SSRIs in the past, but I have questions. That question was not answered, but I have questions. He worked from home from about 2018. She was a labor and delivery nurse on maternity leave after their first child. She had some anxiety after birth, struggled with going back to work. They had a babysitter that would come for 12 hours a week. She was working overnight shifts, and the babysitter could be at the house tending to their child while she slept. Um, she had some physical difficulties after her first two pregnancies, just like medical stuff that comes up after birth. Um, they asked about her demeanor during maternity leave and that there was a pattern of struggling going back to work and difficulty being separated from the children, which can be normal, like that normally, but the state seemed to kind of play that up a lot. She briefly saw a therapist after their second child, and then they had their third child in 2022. They had a normal summer because they had their third child in May, and he described them having a normal summer and that she had some anxiety starting in September. And it's not that postpartum symptoms don't always start right after, but typically I don't know how she would describe it, or if a lot of the clients I've worked with that have had postpartum, those symptoms started after birth. There normally wasn't a gap. So that's where, if I was diagnosing this, if there was a period of time that was normal after birth, but really the struggle was with returning to work, I personally might diagnose that different. I don't know. But this is based on his understanding of what was going on with her, not hers. So I don't know. They gave the name of the nanny. She mentioned that she was starting Zoloft to help with the anxiety. It did not improve. She got more depressed. And she told her husband that she had been advised to double the dose of Zoloft. And that's where I wonder if the state has information. I wonder if there's more information about that. She wanted the husband to sleep in the basement. He did that for a few days, and then she went to the basement for a few weeks. And so the state points out that he doesn't know if she wasn't sleeping or not because they weren't in the same room. And then the state goes through 7 pills were taken of the Zoloft from one prescription. And these are just the prescriptions that Patrick gave them as part of the evidence. She received a recommendation for a perinatal psychiatrist. So that's like a post-labor. So this is somebody that specializes in postpartum. And this referral was from Patrick's mother. And the Ativan, there were 6 pills missing of the 30. The Boost Par, which is like Prozac, there were only 2 pills of the 30. The hydroxyzine, which is kind of like Benadryl, but it's like it's like an anxiety medication. General information, not any recommendation. Only 3 pills had been taken, and then no pills of the November Boost Par prescription. Trazodone, which is a sleep aid, only 7.5 of 30 pills had been taken. And then that she was on, maybe 3 medications were prescribed at one time. And the most, I'm sorry. So the most medication she was on at one time was maybe 2 to 3. Okay. So she went to the hospital after she had went 40 hours without sleeping. And that's where it came up that she had tested positive for cannabis. And the state, of course, brings up that she didn't tell the staff. And then they say that she was on Seroquel and she lost weight. I have never had a client lose weight on Seroquel. Seroquel normally causes a weight gain. So I've had clients gain 40 pounds in a month on Seroquel. I have never, ever. And I've had multiple clients on Seroquel. I have never had a client lose weight on Seroquel. Seroquel is a newer, I think it's a newer antipsychotic. It can also be used for stabilization. So she says that she lost, I think 40. So this my understanding is that there was maybe lost 40 pounds in a week on Seroquel, and I have never ever had a client lose weight on Seroquel. Now, does that mean it's not that didn't happen? I don't know. But Seroquel is definitely a stronger medication. It is in the antipsychotic mood stabilization family. Okay. All right. Uh, and so the state asked if he was aware that someone clicked methods of self-delete in August of 2022. So August of 2022 would be that summer before she started any medications, because he said he started seeing some changes in September. And I think the state is trying to say he didn't know her that well, like that there were some parts of her, some sides of her that he did not see and that he did not recognize. Is that true? We do not know. This is the state. I can't wait for the defense to cross-examine, and then the defense might also call him in their case in chief, because he and I don't know if they'll ask if they can have, I don't know. I don't know if the defense will want to wait and call him later. I don't know what will happen. Because they can only cross-examine him on things that the state brought up. They might have more that they want to bring up. I'm not a lawyer. I'm talking with Josh tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. Okay. So you all will be redirected, hopefully, to the stream with Courtroom Confidential. We're going to be chatting about this case a little bit later today. All right. So it came up that she was having thoughts of harming the children and having intrusive thoughts. So intrusive thoughts are those thoughts you don't want, that you can't control. And he denied that she was showing signs of wanting to harm the children, according to Patrick. She went to the hospital because she told her dad that she wanted to self, and it didn't bother her at all. And she was recommended for a day program. The state brought up that she was taking selfies. So I watched with Corgison. So Corgison, I hope I'm saying that correct. And she shouted me out. So she said my name because I said hi. And she said my name, and she showed the picture. It wasn't it wasn't like a Mackenzie Shirilla hospital selfie. It looked like something you would send your family if you were in the hospital, because just wanted to let them know, hey, I'm in the hospital. It didn't seem attention seeking, or I don't know. But the state definitely showed that selfie. I wasn't. To my knowledge, she was never on Haldol. To my knowledge, I don't believe she was ever on Haldol. I could be wrong, but I don't think she was. I could be wrong. Oh yeah. So Haldol is the medication that was in the Delphi case. That's a first generation antipsychotic. It is very, very powerful. It's more powerful than Seroquel, and it can cause some tardive dyskinesia. It can cause some motor things that can happen with some of those. The newer antipsychotics have less side effects, but some of the old ones work really well. And often jails, I think the old ones are cheaper than Seroquel. I think Seroquel can be expensive sometimes. So the jails often use cheaper medications. I'm just being honest. Yeah, sorry. Let's see. And it works fast and it makes somebody calm down. They often go to sleep. That's my understanding. So she was transferred to McLean Hospital. So this was the inpatient stay, and that was January 1st, 2023. He visited her 2 or 3 times, and she was there for, I think, 4 or 5 days. And he says that she didn't see a doctor until Tuesday. So let me pull up the calendar for 2023. January 2023. Well, okay, so I have to go back to 2023. There we go. January was a Tuesday. So January 3rd was that Tuesday. She was admitted on Sunday, and she did meet. So I worked at an inpatient hospital, and I would be on call for the weekend. even if it's a holiday weekend. So for Christmas, for all the holidays, some staff, a mental health staff and psychiatry staff, were on call for any admissions in the hospital uh, overnight. So I would have to call in each morning. So if I was on call for a Saturday and Sunday or a holiday, I would have to call in the morning. Were there any admissions? And if they said no, yes, because I meant I had the day off. If there were admissions, yes, we have two. Yes, we have three. Yes, we have four. Then I would go and I would meet with each one because I think over that weekend I would have to provide therapy to each one of those clients over the weekend. And I would help develop their treatment plan. So just because somebody comes in on a weekend, they always receive care because also they are billing for that care. So the state, of course, brought up that she saw a resident on the Sunday and Monday, and I think by and then she met with the attending psychiatrist. Now, her thing might have been I didn't meet with like a real because some people so residents do good work. Sometimes a resident will take more time with you, will listen to you better than I don't know. Like so I haven't had any bad experiences when I was on the acute unit. I was able to become friends and we're still Facebook friends. Some of the residents that are now psychiatrists. And so, but the state brought up that she received group therapy, that she received individual therapy. They went through all of the care that she received, also the care that she declined. Because anybody, so in a hospital setting, you might go and say, "Hey, I'm here for your individual therapy session," and they're like, "Not today." So I would just write client declined therapy. I might try again because maybe they were in the middle of an activity or I was trying to get them from, you know, I don't know, like maybe they're in the middle of something, so I might try again. But I just thought it was interesting that they went through all of that. All right. Whew, all right. So let's see. So then they went through the fact that she checked herself out to attend her daughter's birthday. And that was probably something important to her, but like with all that happened, okay. Uh and he started to say that he wasn't aware of Lindsay asking to be discharged, but I forgot what happened with that. And the state brought up the fact that there were no issues with insurance paying for her care. So this wasn't a matter of they weren't able to afford or get her care, that her stay had been approved and that she checked herself out early. They showed video of them at the indoor water park or pool. And then, they start getting closer to the event. The photos of the kids are just so emotional. The closer we get to the day, Patrick Clancy, it was almost as though he was going to have a full blown panic attack. Like his breathing started to get shallower. His blinking got a lot quicker. And understandably, this is the worst day of his life ever. He's the one that found the children. He's the one that called 911. He's, and I'm sure there's a part of him that's like, did I miss something? They are suing the doctors, and I think the state was trying to point out that he might not have known Lindsay as well as he thought he did. I don't know that he'll admit, and it's not for him. Like it's going to be up to the jury to decide, and it's not going to be based on Patrick Clancy's testimony. Like it's really going to be the experts. This is going to be a battle of the experts. And I thought it was interesting that they weren't taking any notes during any of this because this is all just the eyewitness account of what happened. Like nobody's disputing that she did it. So now we need to hear from why the state believes she was in her like right mind and that she did this intentionally and willfully, and then for the defense to say why they believe that she does meet the criteria for not guilty by reason of insanity. And so it's a lot. This is a very heavy case. Please take care of yourself as you are consuming this content. I will continue to give updates. My son turns 9 this weekend. So we will be celebrating his birthday on Saturday. He is having an Animal Crossings themed party, not party because it's a whole other conversation. But it's just going to be, but it's going to be something just it's just going to be us, and we are super excited for that. So I might do a stream Friday night, so stay tuned. So there might be a pop-up. I am not going to stream Saturday or Sunday. I'm just going to spend time with family those 2 days, but I'll likely stream at some other point. Okay? So stay tuned. I'm going to keep an eye on this case. I am not going to watch the medical examiner talking about the injuries. I'm not going to watch that part. When nobody's going to hear the 911 call. And I wonder if more cases, if the victims might advocate for, especially if a victim is the one that made the call, for it to not be monetized all over the internet. I wonder if more victims will attempt to have those things sealed. My heart goes out to the Idaho families. I did see the report that Koberger, that he is attempting to say that he's innocent, which I don't believe personally. I love that they colloquy, like the when they, and I might be saying that wrong, but when they have the defendant go through, is anybody coercing you to do this? Have you been promised anything? You're saying this because you actually did it. Like, I think they have a pretty good record where he's saying yes to all of those questions. So I don't think he's going to overturn his conviction. I think he just wants attention. So that's why I'm not going to do a whole other video, because I think he wanted to be infamous. I think he wants people to still talk about him. So I personally, I'm only going to do it if he actually does get a new trial. And I don't think he will. So we'll see. Somebody said we will get a transcript of the call. And I would actually prefer a transcript over actually hearing it. A transcript will be less than the other. Let's do a review of Colt sentencing now, okay? I watched that earlier today. If you followed the Colt Gray case, he was a 14-year-old, so he is. He's older now. I don't know his exact age, but this was Appalachia High School. This was a mass incident. And I think he's another one that wants infamy. So that's why I don't want to do a whole other video just on him. I have multiple videos. I covered his father's case very, very closely. I do think he was a victim of significant neglect. And yet I do also think there was a dark part of him that wanted to become famous. And so if you don't know anything about this case, Colt Gray, he so this was 2024. He went into Appalachia High School. He had missed all of 8th grade. He was supposed to be a 9th grader. And he was living with his dad. His mother had been, the allegation, CPS testified that they have done founded claims of harm against his mother and his father. I think they said like 12 counts against mother and 11 counts against dad. And he had unrestricted access to weapons. The father actually purchased him a weapon. The father was convicted of like this incident as well. And the testimony in this is just so heartbreaking. I did see some of the psychological testimony in it, but he pled guilty to 55 charges. So he did avoid a trial. And the judge admitted that, like, hey, all right, like, I appreciate the fact that you saved us all the trial, but the judge still did not think that he should get parole, that he's still very much a risk and a danger to society. And so he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. I'm just getting my headphones so that we can listen to this. Put a 1 in the chat if you can still hear me. Hopefully you can still hear me. I am going to share my screen once I pull up the video. I watched it earlier today, so it should be in my recent videos. The judge did a really good job going through this, so I want to just play it. You all will get to see the types of videos that I watch. It's nothing bad. Share screen. This one. All right, this one.
All right, we are all present. Never before have I had to sentence a 16-year-old. Certainly for something someone did when they were 14 years of age. Those who appear regularly in front of me have often heard me lament about the difficulty in sending a young person to prison. And here, as everyone understands, the minimum sentence is life with parole. Now, the appellate courts have said that children are constitutionally different from adults for purposes of sentencing. That stems from an understanding that juveniles aren't fully formed cognitively. Hallmark features of a juvenile include immaturity, impulsivity, recklessness, the failure to appreciate risk and consequences. And because of these factors, the Supreme Court says that the Eighth Amendment prohibits the death penalty for juveniles. The Supreme Court also disfavors life without parole for juveniles, declaring it to be a constitutionally forbidden, disproportionate sentence in all but the rarest of cases. Life without parole is thus authorized only for youthful crimes reflecting permanent incorrigibility. Life without parole is barred for crimes that are born out of a transient immaturity of youth. Now, I recognize that with your guilty plea, you've assumed responsibility for your crimes. You have made a lengthy and public trial unnecessary. I also recognize that you were failed by each of your parents. You were failed by your extended family. To a certain extent, you've been failed by a society that can't stop propagating this misguided value in online cultures and social media, rather than making genuine interpersonal connections and relationships. But that failure does not absolve you from who you chose to idolize, worship, and become. 4 lives were stolen, 2 of them really just beginning, and it wasn't done out of fear or anger. You weren't being bullied at Appalachia. It wasn't done out of hatred. You didn't even know anyone at that school. It was done for the infamy of it. Now, your childhood instability and neglect would explain or mitigate finding yourself in one of those problematic places that Dr. Richards testified about. But planning, fantasizing about, visualizing, and executing school shooting don't put you in a problematic place. It puts you in an unredeemable moral wasteland. Your crimes do reflect permanent incorrigibility, and I will sentence you to life without parole for each of the malice murders that you committed. You understood the horror of what you were going to do. You studied the trials of those other shooters. You even critiqued the victim statements given in those cases, and yet you did this anyway. You wrote, "I want to make history. I want people to remember the pain I caused." And there you succeeded. The pain that you visited upon this community is unlikely to disappear in my lifetime. You do not seem to be tormented by what you did. You seem to relish following in the footsteps of the murderers you idolize. You aren't racked with guilt. You're proud of yourself. Less than a month after the tragedy, you weren't concerned with the horror you wrought, but rather with finding out which mass murderers they were comparing you to. A youth may fail to consider the harm his rash actions inflict before acting, but you did consider it. You studied that pain when you researched the trials of your profane idols. You contemplated that pain over and over. This wasn't transient immaturity, it was deliberate, contemplated evil. You were all too aware of the court outcome of those mass shootings because you studied and obsessed over them. You know that the Aurora Theater shooter received life without parole. Nicholas Cruz received life without parole. Ethan Crumley, a juvenile, received life without parole. Yet you were not dissuaded. Your plan was not hastily hatched. It was a slow boil simmering more than a year's time. You savored the thought of it, you visualized it, and you fantasized about it. You broke it down step by step in visualizing what you were going to do. The thought of mimicking these other mass murderers is what brought you joy. Now, for the rest of us, there is no joy here today. There's only a measure of closure. The slain will not return to life. The injured will not forget their wounds, and a 16-year-old boy will live and die in prison. You have certain post-plea appellate rights and need to inform you of. You have a right to file a notice for a discretionary appeal within 30 days of today's date.
So I don't think there was anything major after that part. I thought the judge did am I still frozen? Am I back? Am I back? Am I back? Let me know if I'm back. Hopefully I'm back. Me and my internet. The judge was very thorough, very, very thorough. I liked that judge. I didn't watch all of it. Good. I didn't watch all of it. So I did not hear, because there's a good question about the calls with his mother, but I did hear social services say that he improved after contact with his mother and father was cut off, and that they kind of thought his mother was kind of feeding him stuff and kind of that she wasn't healthy and she wasn't a good influence for him. The social services would consider letting his mother have contact with him again, but it might be supervised or therapeutic, that there just might be some limits set on it. I can imagine the call with mom was likely problematic. So I didn't hear it, but I can imagine. Have I testified in court? Yes, it's okay. I have testified in family court. And so multiple times. So I've testified as a fact witness. So before I was licensed as a psychologist, I did intensive in-home therapy, where I would work with kids and teens and adults, often involved with the social services system. So in a case like this, I might have been Colt's sister's in-home therapist. And when there were court dates related to custody and things like that, I might have to go in and testify about observations from visits, or any things that came up in therapy related to whatever we were talking about. I used to do psychological evaluations for social services, not capacity evaluations, because there's something called a parenting capacity, where you evaluate if the person has the ability to parent. I don't do those. I would just do general psychologicals. And sometimes I would have to go into court and testify, especially if a person did not follow the recommendations that I provided. Because sometimes social services was working to either terminate rights, or they were working to maybe extend, but not return the children just yet. And I've also testified in custody stuff. Not a fan, not a fan at all. But those are the types of things. Not forensic. So I am a clinical psychologist, and I prefer the clinical side because in forensic, me being in court could ruin the relationship I have with my client because I might have to talk about things that the client doesn't want me to talk about, but the judge can compel me to say the information and answer the questions, even though it might hurt my relationship with my client or with the other parent. Because if I'm testifying in a custody situation, now I never because I would only have an opinion about the other parent if it was something I observed, if it was something. So normally I'm just saying what the client said, what was going on with the client, and any recommendations that I had. But recommendations, I normally don't have recommendations about like how much time my client should have with one parent or another. I despise going to court. It's I get paid. I get paid very well to go, but it's just I have to cancel my whole day. Our courts, you can't bring your phone in. There are some courts where you can bring your phone. You can't bring anything to drink. Like it's a lot. I'm not a fan, but it is what it is. I'll never forget one time I got like a whole brand new coffee and I was going into court. And when I go into court, they sometimes are like, "Are you a lawyer?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, "You can't bring coffee." I'm like, "No." And I had to throw away a brand new coffee that broke my heart, but it is what it is. Hi. So let's see. All right. There was another question. We're going to go back to the Lindsay Clancy case. What do I think of the medications she was on? So I am not a psychiatrist or a expert in medication. I do think she was on a lot of medications because there's like 13 in 4 months. That is a lot. And it seems like she had a negative reaction from the first one. So if I was her therapist and I'm like, I'm on this, I'm on this, I'm on this, I might have tried to reach out to her psychiatrist to say, can we just like let the system, like, I don't know, like, is there something we can do to just let everything settle and then see where to go? Like things, my client keeps reporting that things are getting worse. Like, and I'm concerned about this. Their mood seems elevated. If it did, like I would have communicated with the psychiatrist if needed. But justice for that coffee. It was super sad. I remember it was only a 7-Eleven coffee, so it wasn't like it was like Starbucks or something. I probably would have cried if it was, I don't like it probably I would have been very upset if it was like a frappuccino or something. But yeah. I've learned even lawyers hate family court. Family court is just, it gets messy. It gets so messy. And I always tell both sides what my opinion is. So, and what I mean by that, just so there are no surprises, and to hopefully try to keep, because often I'm still having to be the family or the individual therapist after all of this. So, and then I have certain boundaries where if there's court involvement, I don't work with the parent and the child. And what I mean by that is if I'm asked to do a psychological evaluation and somebody is court involved, I won't be the therapist for their child. Um, because if I'm called to court for that involvement, I just want to go in with clean hands. And so family court is draining. So I'm going to get ready for Courtroom Confidential. I will be over there at 8 p.m. Eastern. Y'all be kind, don't do crimes, and I will see you all next time. I hope you all have a good one. Bye.